about February of 05. But I said to myself, and Rob was telling me the same thing, he said there'll come a time where the opportunity will present itself for you to wage some struggle, and what the purpose for you is to do now is not so much to struggle individually in terms of how you feel, but raise these issues among your colleagues and start to build a base among people around it. That summer, I wrote a letter to my chain of command on every grievance that I had, from racist remarks being made in the shop constantly, sexist remarks being made, pictures of a few of the females in our shop. I'm not going to say what these pictures were showing. They put them out on the walls and whatnot. This is what these guys used to do. Guys coming drunk on duty, being protected in the shop. And what the chain of command said to me was, Hutto, it's not their fault, it's your fault. No, you the one that won't conform, see, to the culture the way it is. This is the way the Navy is. All the other stuff you talking about, nah, this is the way we do things. Okay, roger that. All right, so that was the summer of 05. By January of 2006, I'm off the coast of Iraq, coming down to the shop, I was talking to somebody. Oh yeah, talking to my buddy Capella, a Puerto Rican friend of mine. He was a Muslim, and he had just gotten to the boat, so you can imagine being a Muslim. They called him Osama every day, and they take him through all kind of mess. And all of a sudden, one of these guys, I guess he really bolded now. He gonna pull up a hangman's noose in my face, and him and the other guy, they making mockery of lynching. I had it then. I said, okay. I was that close from anyway. So I went ahead and left the shop, went upstairs, started getting my buttons together. And I said, okay, how am I going to fight this situation? I said, well, I'm going to raise this. I said, nobody from the captain to the president of the United States himself will stop me in terms of what I'm about to do right now. I mean, that's when you get to that point. If you ever read that poem by Claude McKay called "If We Must Die," you ever read that? It was written in 1919 in response to what was known as the hot summer of 1919, where it was just a lot of racial conflict in the country. And he wrote that in a response to this. And there's certain lines that stick to me. With the one, it starts out by saying something to the degree of, if we must die, let us nobly die, so that our precious blood will not be shed in vain, so that those who defy us will have to honor us, though dead. And then it goes further to say at the end that, I might be pressed to the wall dying, but I'm going to still be fighting back. That's how I felt at that moment. I said, these guys, they could jail me, they could break me, they could throw me off this ship if they want to, but I'm going to fight these folks to the hill. Brought our little collective together of folks who felt the same way we felt, and we constructed about a 4 to 5 page letter on that incident in particular, those other incidents, sent it to the admin officer on the boat, CC the equal opportunity people, and then sent it all the way down the chain of command. Sent it off the boat, sent it to Congressman John Lewis. We was faxing people everywhere. Right? Now we got a response. Now we got a full equal opportunity hearing. Now we got people going before the captain, the XOY. They got to save this image. You fighting a war against terrorism, a war against against weapons of mass destruction, a war against tyranny and dictatorship off the coast of Iraq, and you got folks looking at hanging nooses on the United States aircraft carrier. Can you imagine that? The conflict there. So now they do everything they can to save face. The perpetrator did get reduced in rank. All right. Was restricted to the boat for 30 days. But for us, that wasn't enough. Because quite frankly, we had seen shipmates get drunk on duty, get thrown in the brig for 30 days. So we figured you can get drunk, get thrown in the brig. Why racism? You can get about a couple months in the brig. So we appealed it. We lost the appeal, but the point is what we ended up doing, more so than punishing that individual perpetrator and also holding accountable his immediate superiors, what we ended up doing was changing the whole culture of the shop, literally. There hasn't been an open, racist, sexist, xenophobic incident in that shop from that day to about 14, 15 months afterwards. You had certain guys in that shop that it took them 45 months to even talk to me. Some of them. And then it took other guys who came to me and me like, man, I'm glad, man, right on, they were really happy, But I'm coming back to my buddy Rod. That was a micro example of what that advocacy said. That if you want to change an environment, you have to do so from within that institution itself. That you don't change the situation by running from it or going away from it. You actually have to change by confronting it head on, you know. And so that was my own personal experience with that. How do we get to the appeal for redress? Well, as I was engaged in that struggle, right when it started, that professor of mine I keep telling y'all about sent me this book when I was off the coast of Iraq. It's titled Soldiers in Revolt. Now, of course, Vietnam resistance to me growing up as a kid was, of course, you know, Muhammad Ali's famous statement, right? You know, I ain't got no problem with Viet Cong, never call me nigga, you know. You know, Dr. King's advocacy, the advocacy of SNCC, you know, the advocacy that took place in '68 post-democratic convention, you know, Kent State, you know, people like Jane Fonda, you know, I mean, this was what the image was for me. So when I got this book, I'm looking at it like, huh, this is interesting. A soldier that says war is hell. Interesting. So then I opened the book and I couldn't put it down, you know, and once I read it, I immediately wanted to get in contact with the author of this book. Who is this guy? Well, I found out his name is David Courtwright. Today he serves as a professor of peace studies at the Joan Arc School of Peace Studies in Notre Dame. But at that time, similar to my buddy Rod, he found himself in Vietnam after having gotten his bachelor's degree from Notre Dame. And immediately was disenchanted with the war and immediately hooked on to what was then a small but growing GI movement within the ranks of the military. This was a movement that began, some people started moving around about 1965 or 66. Started with a guy they attributed to a guy named Dr. Howard Levy, who was an officer. Everybody like, yeah. I like that, good stuff. Who refused to continue to train folks to go into Vietnam and actually, you know, serve medicine, provide medical care to the Vietnamese, because for the most part, Howard Levy came to the conclusion, as we know, that this was really a cover for what was coming behind that medicine. You know, napalm and bombs, right? And so he refused. And for his refusal, he was tried. He actually served 2 years in the federal prison at Leavenworth, okay? But it was during that trial, he said, it was interesting because he said when he did it, he said he didn't know there was any movement. He said he hadn't heard of no GI movement. He just personally, individually said, how you doing? But he said something special was happening because he said as he was going to his trial, he said he would see, you know, he said the MPs themselves who were sitting there, you know, holding the guns. He said all of a sudden some of them throw a peace sign. He walking to the trial. It's interesting. He said some people out the barracks throwing fists, you know. So he said in 1966 he knew that something special was going on. It was at that time that then it began to develop into a full-fledged movement, okay? And it's that movement that ultimately is the inspiration behind the appeal for redress and why we're here today. It was a movement that for the most part was spontaneous. There was no central organizing arm. The movement within the armed forces was an extension of the overall movement that was taking place in the society as a whole. You know, as I was saying earlier, I was being interviewed by Channel 2 out here. She was asking me about, you know, how is it that, you know, those of us who are involved with the appeal for redress can serve alongside other members of the military who may agree with the occupation of Iraq. I said, well, we're not a monolithic military. You know, the members of the military are recruited from the various society out here. You know, so hence, you think about it, it's 1963, 64, 65, 66, 67. What's going on in the country? Okay? And where these people that have been recruited, where are they coming from? And where are their influences being actually coming from? They bring those influences right into the armed forces. Okay? So, of course, you know, people actually going to Vietnam. My mama tells the stories. We've seen it. You know, I used to go to the Vietnam War Memorial when I was a college student. I know many of you have been there. You would be so saddened to see people actually look at that wall. Some people literally collapse. You know, they see a name of a loved one or whatnot. My mom tells a story of a college student who, you know, walked to the class one morning. She never saw him again. You know, don't know to this day. You know, probably maybe she does and ask her afterwards. But the point is that, you know, that's what the movement was. It was a movement that at its height was not only spread around this entire country, but the entire world. It was a movement that had an arm of communication. They called it the GI newspapers. These were underground newspapers that soldiers and sailors and Marines published. They estimate over 300 of these. They got them all listed in the back of this book here. Were published all over the world, dealing with all sorts of issues from, you know, calling for an end to the war, looking at these basic grievances, looking at the issue of pay, the issue of housing. Some of